On this week's episode, we sit down with a pioneer from the world of electric vehicle charging, Mr. Ravin Mirchandani from Quench EV Chargers. We explore the realms of EV charging and his journey in the EV industry on this podcast.
Welcome to What's Next with Adi. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you, Aditya. It's a privilege to be on your show. Thank you.
Certainly. So, just starting off, what drew you to the field of sustainable mobility?
I don't know how long that answer can be, but essentially my life has always been about the road. I'm a traveler at heart, both physically and also spiritually, and so all the industries I've been drawn to were about the road. My previous life was in LPG and LNG. In the business, we focus on power electronics, and it was not a very big leap for us to take that power electronics into both road safety as well as clean mobility.
Okay. Also, you just spoke about so many things. So you have been in the business since what, a lot of time. How are you able to do so many things? I mean, on one side, you're making one of the fastest DC chargers, you're running a podcast, and you're working on road safety, and I'm pretty sure you're putting quite a few hours in the gym. How are you able to do so many things?
I think the short answer to that is I do them all very badly because there's inadequate time to do all of them. But the truthful answer would be I'm very lucky to work with a very strong, capable, talented team of young people who actually get everything done. Even on the podcast, it's really the energizing India team that sits at the back that makes it all happen. I need to spend only 40 minutes in front of the screen. So my job is the easiest part, but the rest is done by a very capable team. It's the same with the Quench team. We designed the fast charger in 90 days, really, during lockdown. And then from that, now we've evolved into 9 different products. And it's because we focused on getting a very capable, very strong, technically competent team. We're also very well balanced between men and women. We have 50% women in the Quench management team, and also a very good spread of people from North and South India. So I think we bring all these competences to make a little bit of magic, and that's why it all comes together so well. So I have very little bit to do with it, Aditya.
Magic is in the team. But how do you get a team like that? I mean, if it was so easy, everyone would be superhumans today.
That's a very good question. We do a lot of things to attract the right team. First, it took us 4 years to qualify as a great place to work. So we really focus on the culture of the organization. Your culture has to have a little bit of magic so that people are working in a work family, which means that when they want to leave, it's like leaving family. We work around 4 core values in our business, and those 4 are to always stay hungry, to always be brutally honest, to continuously innovate, and to be deserving of all the profits that we make. So you can't be deserving unless you are innovative and are brutally honest and are hungry. And I think the core values is what attracts people to work for us. So we recruit. That's like one of the first questions in our interviews. And if people don't know our core values and can't explain why they like our core values, then we don't continue with the interview. We do an IQ test. We do an EQ test. So there's a strong philosophy that whoever works with us must deserve to work with us. So the interview is not done by one person; it's done by there could be 6 or 7 interviews, and your peers will interview you as well as the direct reporting manager, as well as me. I meet everybody who eventually will join our organization. So it takes a lot of work to get the right culture, and then it takes a lot of work to get the right people. And then your HR packages have to be structured in a way that reward people for the work they do and the contributions they make. And that sometimes might mean outsized incentives. It might mean more creative structures such as options. It could mean a myriad of things to ensure that you attract the right team and are able to train and retain the right team.
Was to have a good core value, whatever they come. Then you can get.
The point I'm trying to make here, Aditya, is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if you have a strategy and a plan to action, but you haven't sorted out your culture, you will never get anywhere with your strategy. So we took a very long time to work on the culture, employ the right team, train the right team. From there, we were able to get extreme clarity on our own objectives as a strategy, then make the plan for strategy into action. So I'd say you start with culture if you want to get your end objectives.
Okay.
I'm always quite amazed when I go to companies that are working so hard at growth but are not fixing their culture, and you can feel it in the organization. You can feel the politics or the fighting that goes on, or the fact that the team isn't got a magic in the way that it works together. I think. So if you look at how the Australian cricket team, for example, went from being decimated in the mid 2000s to all the crises they had with the match fixing or the ball tampering and all those sorts of things, to where they are today, they went back to fix their culture. They spent 4 years fixing the trust between the players and the team, fixing the culture of the team to being a winning team rather than a team of winners. And that's why they're back up, the charts again today. And I think that's a fantastic euphemism for how an organization should work. You have to spend a lot of time on culture.
Also, what are one of your biggest lessons that you have learned as an entrepreneur in the EV industry? Because I believe that you have exposure of various industries. So also, how is it different to work in the EV industry when you compare it to other industries you have been to?
I think all the industries are the same in that the secret to winning is to make sure that you innovate really quickly and you build a very resilient product that is at the right price point for the customer. There will always be someone cheaper than you. In our case, it's always China, because China can build much cheaper than we can, and they have a scale that's 1000x of anything in India. So you have to demonstrate value for your price point, right? So you have to have features in there that make sense to the customer. And whether you're looking at EV charging or hydrogen fuel cells or electrolyzers, making lithium batteries, it's the same. The product you're making is being radically commoditized by somebody else as you're busy designing it. So you have to inbuild your product a set of features that make sense to the market, and you have to inbuild your product design philosophy, how it will deal with commoditization and how it must commoditize itself as you keep innovating new products, which is where your value comes from.
Got it. And the other question that always comes into my mind is, what comes first, a strong EV infrastructure sort of thing, or a customer base? Because both of them are interdependent. People are not buying electric vehicles because there are not chargers, and people are not putting in chargers because there's not more electric vehicles on road. So where does the middle ground come in?
So many things going through my head on that one, and I'm going to have to try to structure this answer. I guess I want to quote Kevin Costner and say, if you build it, they will come. So the entrepreneurial risk is in building the network that gives people the confidence to buy electric cars, because the network for charging is available to them. People will not buy cars unless the infrastructure exists. So if you were to go back 110, 115 years, and let's go to New York or London in 1910, when the cars had just started being seen on the roads, but 90% of people were still in horse-drawn carriages, and even the public transport was a mix of electric tramways and horse-drawn carriages on tracks. At that point, there was the question of, why should I buy a car? Because I can't fill it with petrol. And in fact, when you bought your car, the car company also sold you a very big tank in which you carried your petrol, right? And for many occasions, it was a trailer. So you carried your petrol because when you were doing a road trip, there was nowhere else to get the petrol. So the early adopters always find a way through it. And what we saw in 2020, 21, 22 was perhaps the early adopters finding a way through it, driving 1,000 kilometers with their own charger and their own earthing, and trying to charge the cars in pawn shops and tea shops and dhabas. And today that situation has changed. So go back to 1910, everyone would have been laughing at someone buying a car, going, why are you doing this? You're going to have to find your petrol, cut your own petrol. And yet by 1915, the Model T was launched, and it changed the automotive industry completely, right? And then, of course, from that came the big investments in oil by the companies that dominate the world today. And because that just became a big sector. So it changed within 10 years that you were able to buy fuel anywhere you went with your Model T. And so the same will happen for electrification. So is it a chicken and egg story? No, I think we know that no matter what, you need to build a network. You couldn't have had a cell phone market without the backbone network being built first. You couldn't have an aviation market without the backbone network being built first. You couldn't have electrification of the country without the backbone grid being built first. So the truth is, it needs the network to be made. The problem is not many people want to put money in it ahead of the network being utilized, because your return on capital employed starts to look very poor. So today, the charges in the country, typically average 2 to 3% loading, and the really, really heavily used charges are, cranking up at 15% maybe. Now that, when you try to explain to a bank or the financial sector, is very difficult, right? Because you're just putting good money after bad if you run it on a spreadsheet and go, this doesn't make sense, why are you doing it? Therefore, all the investment is going into fleet charging, because fleet guarantees utilization. So it's coming from bus fleets and taxi fleets. So everybody loves being in that space, because your metrics on return on capital employed, return on investment start to look much better.
True.
But just to finish that point, it's why the big boys in the end invest in this space, right? Because they have the stamina and the staying power for their capital to build a network that will eventually be utilized. So, I think the telecom industry is a perfect example. You see the companies that put in the big investments that are repaying today with all the data that is running through the cables that they laid. So there are companies in India, Charge Zone comes to mind, Jio, Tata. They're doing a great job in rolling out large networks across the country that are addressing this problem. But it's not a chicken and egg question. You need a network for people to buy electric cars.
Okay, but is India's grid in particular ready for the load that's going to come up as the adoption takes up? Because it wasn't designed in the first place to have so many electric chargers drawing energy, putting it into vehicles. Oh yeah, I mean,
You're right. You're absolutely right. If you take the snapshot of today and say, is this grid ready for 20 million vehicles to come on board within the next decade? Yes, that could be an interesting hypothesis to go, I think I might have a problem. And this question, by the way, applies to every country in the world, because every country in the world, from Norway to America, structured its grid. Some countries don't have national grids, but where they do, they structure their grid to meet existing demand, which is for heating, cooking, manufacturing, and suddenly you're adding load to that grid. But no matter whichever sector you see, when you see a stress on the network, you see additional investment come into that, right? So if you look at the government of India's, so in the case of India, if you look at the government of India's own investment plan on power generation, you'd see that there's a significant increase that's going to come from everything, not just coal, but also from our nuclear plants coming on stream, a significant push on renewables, whether it's wind, solar, or alternative. We still have a lot of gas plants. So is that going to be a bottleneck nationally? No. In pockets, maybe yes. So we had Reji Pillai, who is the CEO of the India Smart Grid Forum, on our podcast, I think 2 years ago, and we had posed the same question. And he said, what's interesting is, in a precinct, if one person buys an electric car, then everybody comes to look at it. Like if you're in Vasant Vihar, or if you're in HRS in Bangalore, one guy buys a car and everyone comes to look at it and goes, this is nice, how much does it cost? This is interesting. And then the whole precinct increasingly electrifies, and that puts pressure on the local transformer, because they hadn't thought of that, and the grid's not sophisticated enough to know how the demand changed. And now the transformer is having a problem in accommodating this increased demand in that precinct, until such time as the grid company, the DISCOM, figures out that it needs to make an investment. So you'd have those kinds of interesting challenges. But you only need to see the fact that the government is very confidently putting in 5,000 electric buses, going to 150,000 electric buses over the decade, new electric buses being implemented in cities across India, and they are not concerned about the inability of the grid to sustain this demand.
So, build it along.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. Also, what are your thoughts on the importance of standardization and collaborations in overcoming the challenges of the EV charging infra in particular? Like it could be, implementation of charging protocols or standardized charging ports. How do you see that coming up? Because it hasn't grown so much as of today.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and one that frustrates us in the industry significantly. Do you need standardization? Yes. Is it possible to do? Yes, but boy, is it going to be very difficult, because the ecosystem is so myriad. The only company that has done it is Tesla. And they did it, and they've done it really well. And they did it because whatever they wanted to put in place did not exist. So they created it all, right? They made an electric car that was sexy and fast and at a good price point. but they needed batteries. Nobody had the batteries, so they made and designed their batteries. Then they needed a charging network, so they made and designed their charger, and they made and designed their protocol, and they put in place this fast charging network. So you get plug and charge, right? You turn up with your Tesla, you plug it in, you charge. The rest of the world, you have an automotive company, then you have a battery company, then you have an electric company, then you have people making chargers like us, then you've got policy regulators who are doing their own thing in their own vacuums, trying to make decisions. So to get all these protagonists in the value chain to talk to each other is near impossible at this stage. There's many countries trying to do it. In India, if you see the perspective we had in India was we tried the DC001 Bharat, charging protocol for cars, which was a variation of the Chinese GBT protocol at that time, 2017, 2018. And then after that, the government kind of had a hands-off approach to say, let the best protocol win, particularly for the four-wheelers. We'll talk about two-wheelers in an instant. And we settled on the European standard, which is CCS2, just naturally, because the European automotive market tends to set the policy for the rest of the world because they are the powerhouse for anything automotive. So CCS2 became the standard and is increasingly becoming the standard for India. You still have buses, the early electric buses that came from China or were done by Chinese companies in India are on the Chinese standard GBT. The first electric cars were the Nissan Leaf, and that's on a Japanese standard, Shademo. And so, you have these myriads of standards, and they're all operating in India. But eventually, I think we will rest on CCS2 because if everybody can use the same infrastructure, it lowers the infrastructure a lot better. So is there a need for standardization? Yes. Is it happening? Kind of. And it's going in the right direction. Okay. Standardization, though, gives you many more benefits, right? So first up, we have America with CCS1, now moving to the Tesla standard. You have the rest of the world running on the European standard CCS2, including India, Australia. You have China doing its own thing, GBT, and Japan started with Shademo and kind of moving to CCS2, but not quite sure, right? So in India, we will rest on CCS2, I think. Increasingly, it's looking like that. And that's a good thing. But from standardization comes many more benefits, right? For example, how do you get to plug and charge? How do you facilitate that a Tata Nexon owner or a Kia EV6 owner has the same experience as a Tesla owner when they turn up at a charger? They just connect and they don't have to do anything else. Today, you've got to download an app, have a wallet, have a paywall. Every CPO has its own app, and so it tends to get a little complicated. Having a standard and then having the automotive industry come together to then agree with the charger OEMs as well as the bodies, the industry bodies, on how to facilitate in a very secure software protocol way the exchange of information between a car and a charger and the charger and the CPO to allow plug and charge is going to be our next challenge. And I would foresee that if we were having this conversation in 2 years, we would be well down that road with a lot of improvements already happened to the customer experience. I don't know if I answered your question, but the short answer is yes, standardization is required. It's very difficult, but we're kind of going in the right direction.
Okay. And also, as a company focused on electric vehicle charging, how do you see the long-term potential of hydrogen fuel electric vehicles compared to battery electric vehicles?
This is a religious divide. There's a religious divide between swapping and charging and FCEV. And depending on who's invested where, you can get a very violent response to your question.
In general,
I would say from our perspective, because we've invested in the whole spectrum, so we are quite agnostic on hydrogen versus electric. As the world progresses, we will move from the one-size-fits-all energy model that we had for the last 110 years, which was, you buy your car for your, you only had one choice really. So you bought the same car for shopping, going to work, as well as, going on your road trips on weekends. But as we move forward, your use case will determine what kind of fuel you're going to use. So, a majority of India does 30 kilometers a day. You're stuck in traffic and, you're stuck in a parking lot that's a traffic jam, but you do 30 kilometers a day. For 30 kilometers a day, it's too expensive to use a hydrogen fuel cell, and you don't need a hydrogen fuel cell. You could buy a very cheap electric car You could buy a car that only has a range of 150 kilometers because you can charge at home, and your 95% use is going to work in coming back, right? So you can buy a very cheap electric car with 150 kilometer range, and it's adequate because you'll charge at your office or at your home every night in slow charge and cheap electricity. If you're a fleet, a taxi or a bus or a truck, or if you're a plane or a train and you do a significant distances every day, then hydrogen starts to be interesting because hydrogen saves you a lot of time in charging. Hydrogen will increasingly become cost effective because both the cost of the fuel cell as well as the cost of generation of hydrogen is going to drop significantly over the next 10 years. And so, if your use case is long distances, you might use hydrogen. Within electric, you have different chemistries. You have lithium ion, but sodium ion will come on the scene. And if you're going to go slow and with a big load, sodium ion might be interesting, right? So if you're just doing last mile deliveries for Amazon or Flipkart, or if you're doing Food Panda and all those sorts of things, sodium ion might be adequate, right? So you will have in the future, when you go to a fuel station, it's actually going to be a molecule agnostic energy recharge location, not a fuel station. A molecule agnostic energy recharge location means when you drive in, you'll be able to get petrol, diesel, LPG, you might get biodiesel, LNG, CNG, as well as charge your car, do a battery swap, or fill hydrogen. Because no matter what energy source you are needing for your mobility requirement, you'll be able to get it at that fuel station, right? I think in the future, there is no threat of one technology to the other. There is going to be a myriad of options, and your use case will define what option you choose. And if your 95% use case is 30 kilometers, you'll buy a cheap electric car. And for your 5%, when you're driving, up to Uti or Kodaikanal, or you're going to Leh, you'll hire a car, which is a 4-wheel drive, and that'll create a new industry of hire vehicles for weekends. The other point in charging protocols that we didn't touch on in the last question, and if you permit me 30 seconds to talk about it, is for two-wheelers, right? And the problem we have today on two-wheelers is everybody's doing their own thing. There are a couple of companies that are trying. Ather is one of them that's trying to create a standard. And I think it would benefit the two-wheeler industry if we moved to a particular standard to India. The government is also trying to create a policy for that, one charging protocol in India, because then the two-wheelers also can be charged at any location. So whether it's a fuel station or a coffee stop, or any two-wheeler will be able to connect to any plug, and that is just a much better use of infrastructure than I've got a Hero plug or a Bajaj plug or a TVS plug, and you've got to wait and look for it. And you'll see that in Europe they did that with the phone. Right now, even the iPhone uses the USB-C because they said no, we're just going to standardize.
Also, you were speaking about battery swapping, but do you see battery swapping as a potential solution for range anxiety, especially after the developments in fast charging and solid state batteries coming up?
Yeah, again, a very good question. And I think you'll get a different answer based on which industry person you're speaking to, based on how much money they've put in a technology. Battery swapping works really well if you are a two-wheeler or a three-wheeler. And you want to pull in because you're a last mile delivery, or you're a rickshaw and you want to just pull into the station and swap your battery. It's a little bit harder for cars, because if you're going to allow for a battery swap between a Mercedes and a BMW and a Volkswagen, it means that their engine architecture has to be identical. That's not going to happen. So you're not going to see battery swapping happening for cars, for example. When you come to buses and trucks, there are companies. I know there's a company in Australia that's working on a battery swap for trucks. There's a lot in China with automation and robots that do battery swapping for trucks. But from my own perspective, I think they're great interim technologies. But as you move forward, when you get faster charging rates, new battery chemistry, solid state batteries, and all sorts of other myriads of things that will evolve, that makes charging faster and batteries cheaper, the cost of capital to do swapping might be superseded by what you already have as being able to be fast charged. So I think there is a great use case for battery swapping, and that's in the last mile delivery as well as in the 2- and 3-wheelers. China moved so fast 10 years ago that they needed to invest a lot of money in battery swapping, which is why you see that for certain car companies and truck companies. I am not that convinced that you will see that in a big way in India in the four-wheeler segment. But it has an application, it has a use case, it has a benefit, and it's cost effective. And so companies in India that have invested in it are doing very well.
Okay, it's cost effective today, but not so sure about the future.
I think you might find that it'll stay cost effective for certain segments for a long time, like the 2 and 3-wheeler segment.
Last mile delivery.
Because they need really rapid swap, right? Your vehicle, even if it's stopping for 25 minutes to charge, that's 25 minutes of time where you didn't do a delivery and made less money. So.
True. Also, when I was studying about you, I came across a video on YouTube about the e-Digi project. How do you see retrofitting taking up as a business in the EV industry? Like, do you think retrofitting would work? People transforming their existing cars to electric rather than buying new one, because especially Farsis, they're attached to their cars.
So the e-Digi that you refer to is a 1954 Fiat Millicento, the one with the suicide doors. We found it. In fact, we bought it from a wonderful Frenchman who found it decrepit on the side of a highway, and he rehabilitated this beautiful car. And then when he was leaving to France, his name was Brice. We suggested that we buy it from him, and he very kindly offered to allow us to buy this beautiful car. And then during lockdown, since we had nothing to do, we converted it to electric with a 10 kilowatt battery pack and an electric motor. And so we sold it as the world's first Fiat because I think we launched it just before Fiat had launched their first electric car. But we never meant it to be anything more than a little show car and a talking piece and a little bit of fun because it's so cute. The learnings along the way is it's easy to retrofit, but very difficult to homologate. So if you were going to retrofit your car, then you need to go to the ARAI and do the testing to make sure that it is approved to be roadworthy, to be able to be used in India, and that can cost you between 15 to 20 lakhs, right? So you're really significantly increasing the cost of your retrofit if you're doing it just on one car. Now, let's say the army was going to get rid of 1,000 gypsies, and you had a business plan to retrofit them to make them utilize for whatever application that needs quiet and non-polluting cars, and then extend their life by 10 years in a private kind of placement. Then your homologation for 1,000 cars is the cost of that one car. Your homologation for 1,000 of them would be still 20 lakhs because you're just doing it on one and it's approved if you keep doing the same on the others. So will people retrofit only in special use cases? So if you've got a really beautiful old car and it's really complicated to drive and you're not getting spare parts and you still want to keep it, then you would retrofit it to electric because you are extending the life of the joy you get from driving that car. And you're willing to pay that money because you have the disposable income. But would people just start taking their Marutis and retrofitting them? I don't. With the way the regulations are at the moment, and the way the costs of new cars are dropping at the moment, I don't see why people will retrofit. Even when you buy, if you want to take 1,000 buses for a city and say I'll retrofit them, today the model is you lease the bus and you pay per kilometer. Why would you want to retrofit? So I think it'll exist in unique situations. So there are a few companies in Europe. There's one great one in the UK that takes very old antique cars and makes them wonderful luxury electric cars. But it's that unique niche application that allows for the retrofit. You might have equipment that is unique in a mine that is very difficult to replace, and therefore you want to retrofit it to electric. That could happen. You might have equipment airside at an airport that has a life of 20 years and it's working in very unique applications, and you want it to be quiet or clean. That can be retrofitted, but I don't see it as a huge market just for people's cars or trucks.
Okay. Also, how did Acussensus happen? I don't know if am I pronouncing it right?
You are absolutely Acussensus. Yeah.
Okay. How did that happen? And what is your long-term vision for the company's impact on road safety?
So at Adore, we've been in road safety for a while. We have a lot of road safety products and also traffic management products for highways.
Mm-hmm.
So we were in the traffic sector for a while, making digital speed sign, radar, speed signs, all sorts of things that go on highways to count traffic and diagnose, prognose situations. We wrote a lot of software. So the opportunity for Acussensus came because Alex, who is the MD of Acussensus and the founder, had an idea, which was to innovate a technology that would identify people who were impaired, distracted when they were driving, either using their mobile phone or in other ways distracted. And nobody had done that before. And Alex was quite sure that he could build something within 6 months. And that kind of fit within the core values of what we are at Ador, which is to innovate very quickly and get something out in the market and be the first, and then move rapidly with rocket fuel on your idea. And so we partnered with Alex. We invested in the company, and they're a brilliant company. They have grown significantly in the 3 years or 4 years that we've been involved, and were listed on the Australian Stock Exchange last year. So a little startup that was listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, and today operates in Australia, in India, in the US, in the UK, in continental Europe, making a big impact on road safety. So I can give you 2 examples. The government of New South Wales in Australia, as well as the government of Queensland, released data showing that after the technology to identify people who were distracted when driving was implemented, the fatalities in both states in those corridors where they had a high impact was greatly reduced because the technology was implemented. We work with an NGO, an excellent NGO called Save Life Foundation in India, and their core purpose is to reduce fatalities on the roads in India through either engineering redesign or technological implementation. We love them; they're brilliant. And Save Life uses our speed cameras, for example, on the Bombay-Pune Expressway. And Save Lives data over the last 3 years of using this technology has shown that fatalities have halved on that highway. So has the technology made an impact? Yes, absolutely. There's no question about it. And we are very pleased. I think we're fortunate, lucky. That we met Alex, that we were involved with Acussensus, and we are enjoying this journey of being both on the safe side of the road and the clean side of the road, because we are in the end about the road.
True. Okay. Also, one advice that you would give to young aspiring entrepreneurs who are trying to come up into the clean energy sector?
Okay, there's many ways to answer this question, and I'll try to give as much value with brutal honesty.
Okay.
I think you have to start with having extreme clarity on the problem you're trying to solve. And you must have an answer to that question very clearly in your head. What is the problem you're trying to solve? Once you have understood that, the next question is, how do you do it faster, better, and cheaper than anybody else? And how do you keep staying ahead of your competition in solving that problem as you relentlessly commoditize your earlier innovations moving forward in your product value chain? Once you are clear on your idea and have demonstrated your technology, you're going to be looking for funding. And your funding journey is perhaps the next crucial part of your success. So choose your funders and your investors wisely. Don't take money from people simply because they're willing to give you money, but have an investor partner that understands your sector, that has very patient capital, is willing to see you take 3 times as long as you think you will to be successful, and finally can open doors for you to make their own investment a success. Money is, during times of abundance, money is easy to get. We saw that over the last 10 years. Now we're going through the funding winter. It'll come back and swing back to when money is easy. But if you have the wrong investor, your journey is dead again, because you're spending most of your time trying to convince the investor, or you're doing what the investor is telling you should be doing, a strategy, which means you're no longer in control of your company and you're doing all the wrong things, likely, because you have a better understanding of the problem you're trying to solve. So be clear about what you're trying to do, and make sure you have the right partners as investors along the journey is probably what I'd say. And finally, trust your inner voice. A lot of people will tell you many things in bar conversations or in presentations of your pitch deck. They will tell you many things about what's wrong with your product, what's wrong with your business plan. But stay true to your inner voice, and you'll be successful.
Great answer, sir. It looks like that was the last question for today's podcast. It was an honor to have you on the show. Thank you for giving your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be a part of your podcast. I wish you a lot of luck and look forward to seeing the future episodes of the others that you will feature. Thanks very much, Aditya.
Thank you.